Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The Denver skyline glowed in the fading light as I gazed out the window of my home office. My latest architectural project, a sleek glass tower that would redefine the city's profile, was nearly complete on my computer screen. I leaned back in my chair, a satisfied smile playing on my lips. "Daddy, Daddy." Sarah's voice rang out from downstairs. "Come see what I made." I saved my work and headed down to the kitchen, where my 6-year-old daughter was proudly holding up a colorful drawing. "What have you got there, sweetheart?" I asked, crouching down to her level. Sarah's eyes sparkled as she thrust the paper towards me. "It's our family. See, there's you and Mommy and me and Chris." I examined the crayon figures, my heart swelling with pride. "It's beautiful, Sarah. Why don't we hang it on the fridge?" As I was placing the drawing under a magnet, 3-year-old Chris toddled into the kitchen, his chubby hands reaching for me. "Up, Daddy, up." I scooped him into my arms, planting a kiss on his forehead. "How's my little man doing?" "Good," Chris giggled, wrapping his arms around my neck. The front door opened, and Shannon walked in, her high heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She looked tired, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. "Mommy!" Sarah exclaimed, running to greet her. Shannon managed a weak smile, patting Sarah's head. "Hi, sweetie. Dustin, can you handle dinner tonight? I've got a work call I need to take." I frowned slightly. "Another one? That's the third this week." She avoided my gaze, already heading towards the stairs. "I know. I'm sorry. It's just been really busy at the office lately." Before I could respond, she disappeared upstairs, leaving me with a nagging sense of unease. "Daddy, I'm hungry." Sarah tugged at my shirt. I pushed my concerns aside and focused on the kids. "All right, troops. Who wants to help me make spaghetti?" As I cooked dinner with Sarah and Chris helping, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Shannon. She'd been distant lately, always seeming distracted or in a hurry to be somewhere else. We were halfway through our meal when Shannon finally emerged, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. "Sorry about that," she said, sliding into her chair. "How was everyone's day?" Sarah launched into a detailed account of her day at school, while Chris happily smeared tomato sauce across his face. I watched Shannon, noticing how her attention seemed to drift, her fingers tapping restlessly on the table. "How about you, honey?" I asked. "Busy day at work?" Shannon's head snapped up, her eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before darting away. "Oh, same old. Just a lot of projects piling up." I nodded, not entirely convinced. "Anything I can help with?" No, she said quickly. "It's all under control. Actually, I might need to go into the office this weekend to catch up on some things." "Again?" I couldn't keep the frustration out of my voice. "Shannon, that's the third weekend in a row. The kids were hoping we could all go to the park together." Shannon's face fell, guilt flashing across her features. "I know. I'm sorry. It's just, things are really hectic right now. I promise I'll make it up to you all." Sarah's lower lip trembled. "But Mommy, you promised we'd have a tea party." "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Shannon said, reaching out to stroke Sarah's hair. "We'll have our tea party soon, okay?" I watched as disappointment settled over my daughter's face, feeling a mixture of sadness and frustration. This wasn't like Shannon. She'd always put family first, no matter how busy work got. After dinner, I cleaned up while Shannon retreated to our bedroom, claiming she had more emails to catch up on. I tucked the kids into bed, reading them their favorite stories and kissing them goodnight. When I finally made it to our room, Shannon was curled up on her side of the bed, her back to me. I slipped in beside her, wanting to reach out but feeling an invisible barrier between us. "Shannon?" I whispered. "Is everything okay?" She stiffened slightly before rolling over to face me. In the dim light, I could see the conflict in her eyes. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know. You just seem distant lately, like you're always somewhere else, even when you're here." Shannon's gaze dropped, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. "I'm sorry, Dustin. Work has just been really demanding lately. You know how it gets sometimes." I nodded, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in my gut. I know, but we miss you. The kids miss you. Maybe you could talk to your boss about cutting back on some of the overtime? A flicker of something. Guilt? Fear? Crossed Shannon's face before she schooled her features into a neutral expression. I'll try. It's just complicated right now. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's going on at work, or anywhere else, I'm here for you. Shannon squeezed my hand, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I know. Thanks, Dustin. I'm just tired. Let's get some sleep, okay? As she turned away from me again, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she was letting on. But I pushed the thought aside, telling myself I was overreacting. Shannon and I had been together for 10 years. We'd built a life together, a family. Whatever was going on, we'd get through it. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the knot of unease in my stomach. Tomorrow would be better. It had to be. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work and family obligations. I threw myself into my latest project, a sustainable apartment complex that was pushing the boundaries of green architecture. But even as I poured my heart and soul into my designs, I couldn't ignore the growing distance between Shannon and me. One evening, as I was finishing up some work in my home office, my phone buzzed with a text from my colleague, Mike. Hey man, you coming to the firm party tonight? Everyone's asking about you and Shannon. I frowned, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Party? Shannon hadn't mentioned anything about a party. Just then, I heard the front door open and close. Shannon's voice drifted up the stairs, sounding hushed and urgent. No, I can't talk right now. He's home. I know. We'll figure it out, okay? I've got to go. My frown deepened as I heard her hurried footsteps on the stairs. I quickly composed a reply to Mike. Sorry, must have slipped our minds. Maybe next time. Shannon appeared in the doorway, looking flustered. Her cheeks were flushed, and her hair was slightly mussed, as if she'd been running her hands through it. Oh, hey, she said, her voice a little too high. I didn't realize you were home already. I leaned back in my chair, studying her carefully. I've been here all afternoon. Who were you talking to just now? Shannon's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she composed herself. Oh, just a colleague. We're working on a big case, and things are a bit intense right now. I nodded slowly, deciding to test the waters. I just got a text from Mike about the firm party tonight. Did you forget to mention it? Shannon's face paled slightly. Oh, that. I meant to tell you, but it completely slipped my mind. I've been so wrapped up in this case, I forgot all about it. The knot in my stomach tightened. Shannon had never forgotten about a work event before. She was always the one reminding me, making sure we had a sitter for the kids. It's not like you to forget something like that, I said carefully. Shannon, what's really going on? She sank into the chair across from me, her shoulders slumping. I'm sorry, Dustin. I've just been so overwhelmed lately. This case, it's taking up all my time and energy. I feel like I'm drowning. I leaned forward, reaching for her hand. Hey, it's okay. We all get overwhelmed sometimes. But you know you can talk to me, right? I'm here to support you, no matter what. Shannon's fingers twitched in mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw tears in her eyes. But then she blinked, and her expression hardened into something I didn't recognize. I know, she said, pulling her hand away. I need some time to figure things out. On my own. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean, on your own? Shannon, we're a team. Whatever you're going through, we can face it together. She stood up abruptly, avoiding my gaze. I need to go check on the kids. We'll talk later, okay? Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me with a growing sense of dread. Something was very wrong, and I was beginning to fear that our perfect life was about to unravel. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Shannon was slipping away from me. Her soft breathing beside me did little to calm my racing thoughts. What wasn't she telling me? And more importantly, why? I turned my head to look at her sleeping form, the moonlight casting shadows across her face. Even in sleep, she seemed troubled, her brow furrowed slightly. I resisted the urge to reach out and smooth away the lines of worry, knowing that whatever was bothering her, it wasn't something I could fix with a simple touch. As I drifted off into an uneasy sleep, I couldn't have known that my world was about to come crashing down around me. The perfect life I thought we had was nothing but an illusion, and the truth was far more painful than I could have ever imagined. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed and the muffled sound of Shannon's voice coming from the bathroom. I glanced at the clock, 5:30 a.m. Far too early for her to be up on a Saturday. Quietly, I made my way to the bathroom door, my stomach churning with anxiety. Shannon's words became clearer as I approached. "I can't keep doing this, Ashton," she whispered urgently. "He's starting to suspect something." "No, I haven't told him yet. I'm trying to find the right moment." My blood ran cold. "Ashton? Who the hell was Ashton? I know we planned this, but—" Shannon's voice broke. "It's harder than I thought it would be. He doesn't deserve this." I couldn't listen anymore. I knocked on the door, my hand shaking. "Shannon? Is everything okay?" There was a sharp intake of breath, followed by the sound of something clattering to the floor. Just a minute. When Shannon emerged, her face was pale and her eyes were red-rimmed. She clutched her phone tightly in her hand. "Dustin," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yeah, I think we do." We made our way downstairs to the kitchen. The house was quiet, our children still fast asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break. Shannon paced back and forth, wringing her hands. I leaned against the counter, my arms crossed over my chest, waiting. Finally, she stopped and looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I've done something terrible, Dustin." I steeled myself, my voice coming out steadier than I felt. "Who's Ashton?" Shannon flinched as if I'd struck her. "How did you—" "I heard you on the phone," I said, my anger rising. "Now, who is he?" She took a deep breath, seeming to steel herself. He's someone I've been seeing." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. "Seeing?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "You mean—" Shannon nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I've been having an affair. For the past 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of sneaking around behind my back." I felt sick. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "What did I do wrong?" Shannon shook her head frantically. "Nothing. You didn't do anything wrong. It's me, Dustin. I'm the one who messed up." I laughed bitterly. "Messed up? That's one way to put it. How could you do this to us? To our family?" She sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I don't know. It just happened. Ashton and I met at a conference, and things just escalated." "Ashton," I repeated, the name leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. "And who exactly is this Ashton?" Shannon wiped at her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's a businessman. Ashton Kane. He owns several companies in the city." The name rang a bell. Ashton Kane, I'd heard of him. Known for his aggressive business tactics and cutthroat deals. The kind of man who'd stop at nothing to get what he wanted. "So what now?" I asked, my voice hard. "You've had your fun. Are you going to end it?" Shannon's silence spoke volumes. I felt my world tilt on its axis as realization dawned. "You're leaving me for him, aren't you?" She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Dustin. I never meant for this to happen." I slammed my fist on the counter, making her jump. "Bullshit. You don't have a 6-month affair by accident, Shannon. Daddy?" A small voice came from the doorway. We both turned to see Sarah standing there, her eyes wide with fear. "Why are you yelling?" I immediately softened my voice, guilt washing over me. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Mommy and I were just having a grown-up talk. Why don't you go back to bed?" Sarah hesitated, her gaze darting between us. Shannon got up, wiping her eyes. "Come on, honey. I'll tuck you back in." As Shannon led Sarah back upstairs, I sank into a chair, my head in my hands. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? When Shannon returned, her face was set in a determined expression. There's more, Dustin. I looked up at her, wondering what else she could possibly have to say. More? What? Did you rob a bank too? She flinched at my sarcasm but pressed on. Ashton and we've made some plans. Plans, I repeated flatly. What kind of plans? Shannon took a deep breath. We're going to take the kids. I'm filing for full custody. I shot to my feet, rage coursing through me. Like hell you are. You think I'm just going to let you walk away with our children? You don't have a choice, Shannon said, her voice eerily calm. Ashton has connections. We've set things up so that you'll be accused of embezzlement at your firm. I stared at her, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. What are you talking about? She continued, her words cutting through me like knives. There's evidence, Dustin. Fabricated, of course, but convincing. You'll lose your job, your reputation, everything. You can't be serious, I whispered, horror washing over me. Shannon, this isn't you. What has he done to you? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with, guilt, regret, and fear flashing across her face. But then it was gone, replaced by a cold determination. I'm sorry, Dustin, but this is how it has to be. Ashton can give me and the kids a better life. You'll be served with divorce papers next week. I felt as if I was drowning, the world closing in around me. Shannon, please. Think about what you're doing. Think about Sarah and Chris. They need their father. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. They'll be better off with Ashton and me. He can provide stability, financial security. You'll be ruined, Dustin. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How can you say that? I'm their father. A father who's about to be convicted of embezzlement, Shannon shot back. Think about it, Dustin. What kind of life can you give them when you're jobless, maybe even in jail? I stepped towards her, my voice low and dangerous. You won't get away with this, Shannon. I'll fight you every step of the way. She met my gaze, her eyes cold. You can try, but you won't win. Ashton's lawyers are the best in the business. Face it, Dustin. It's over. Get out, I growled, pointing to the door. Get out of my house before I do something we'll both regret. Shannon hesitated for a moment, then grabbed her purse. I'll be back for the kids later. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. As the door slammed behind her, I sank to the floor, my world crumbling around me. How had it come to this? How had the woman I loved, the mother of my children, turned into this cold, calculating stranger? I don't know how long I sat there, lost in my thoughts, before a small voice broke through my haze. Daddy? Where's Mommy? I looked up to see Sarah standing in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. I forced a smile onto my face. Mommy had to go out for a bit, sweetheart. How about some breakfast? As I made pancakes for Sarah and Chris, my mind raced. I couldn't let Shannon and Ashton win. I couldn't lose my children. But how could I fight against fabricated evidence and high-powered lawyers? Daddy, why are you sad? Chris asked, syrup dripping down his chin. I reached out and ruffled his hair. I'm not sad, buddy. Just thinking about some grown-up stuff. Sarah looked at me with her big, innocent eyes. Is it because of the yelling this morning? My heart clenched. You heard that, huh? I'm sorry, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, but it doesn't mean we don't love you. Is Mommy coming back? Sarah asked, her lower lip trembling. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Of course she is. But listen, kids. There might be some changes coming up. Mommy and Daddy, we might not be living together for a while. Chris's eyes widened. Like a sleepover? Something like that, I said, forcing a smile. But no matter what happens, I want you both to know that I love you more than anything in the world. Okay. They nodded, and I pulled them both into a tight hug, determined not to let them see the tears threatening to spill from my eyes. As the days passed, my world continued to unravel. True to Shannon's word, I was served with divorce papers and custody documents. The fabricated evidence of embezzlement surfaced at work, and despite my protests of innocence, I was fired. My colleagues, people I'd considered friends, turned their backs on me. Whispers followed me wherever I went. Did you hear about Dustin Mason? Who would have thought he'd steal from his own firm? I tried to explain, to defend myself, but it seemed like the whole world was against me. Shannon had moved out, taking the kids with her. I was allowed supervised visits twice a week, but it was torture to see my children for such short periods, to have a stranger watching our every interaction. "Daddy, when can we come home?" Sarah asked during one of these visits, her eyes brimming with tears. I pulled her close, my heart breaking. "I'm working on it, sweetheart. I promise I'll fix this." But as the weeks turned into months, that promise seemed harder and harder to keep. The house went into foreclosure. I couldn't keep up with the payments without my job. I found myself packing up my life into boxes, preparing to move into a tiny, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town. As I stood in what used to be our bedroom, surrounded by half-packed boxes, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. My hair was unkempt, my eyes sunken with dark circles beneath them. I looked defeated, and that's when something inside me snapped. "No," I said out loud, my voice echoing in the empty room. "I won't let them win. I won't let them take everything from me." I stepped closer to the mirror, staring into my own eyes. "You hear me, Dustin? You're going to fight back. You're going to get your kids back, clear your name, and make Shannon and Ashton pay for what they've done." A steely resolve formed within me. I may have hit rock bottom, but there was nowhere to go but up, and I was going to claw my way back to the top, no matter what it took. I grabbed a notebook and pen, sitting down at the kitchen counter. It was time to start planning. I'd use every skill I had, every connection I could think of. I'd fight dirty if I had to, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my children, about justice. As I began to sketch out ideas, a plan slowly taking shape, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. Shannon and Ashton thought they destroyed me, but they had no idea what I was capable of. "Game on," I muttered, a grim smile spreading across my face. "You want a war? I'll give you a war." I stood in my new apartment, if you could call it that. The paint was peeling, the faucet dripped incessantly, and I was pretty sure I'd seen a cockroach scurry across the floor earlier. But it didn't matter. This place was just a temporary base of operations. I unrolled a large sheet of paper on the rickety table, my architectural training kicking in as I began to sketch out my plan. It wasn't a building this time, but something far more complex, a blueprint for revenge. "Okay, Dustin," I muttered to myself, "where do we start?" I jotted down what I knew about Ashton Kane. Successful businessman, known for aggressive tactics, but surely someone that ruthless had to have skeletons in his closet. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I tensed, ready for another serve of bad news, but when I opened it, I found a petite woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "Dustin Mason?" she asked, her voice crisp. I nodded warily. "Who's asking?" She held out a hand. "Carla Reeves. I heard you might be in need of my services." I frowned, confused. "I'm sorry, but I don't know what you're talking about. And I certainly can't afford any services right now." Carla's lips quirked into a small smile. "Oh, I think you'll want to hear me out. May I come in?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside, letting her enter. She surveyed the apartment with a critical eye before turning back to me. "Mr. Mason, I'm a private investigator, and I have a proposition for you." I crossed my arms, skeptical. "Look, I don't know who sent you, but—" "Nobody sent me," she interrupted. "I came on my own. I've been following your case, and let's just say I have a personal interest in taking down corrupt individuals like Ashton Kane. That caught my attention." "You know about Ashton?" Carla nodded, her expression hardening. "More than I'd like to. He's got his fingers in a lot of pies, Mr. Mason. Not all of them legal." I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. "What do you mean?" "Shell companies, insider trading, possibly even money laundering," Carla listed off. "But he's careful, smart. It's hard to pin anything on him." "So why come to me?" I asked. "What makes you think I can help?" Carla fixed me with an intense stare. "Because you have nothing left to lose, Mr. Mason. And a man with nothing to lose is a dangerous opponent." I couldn't argue with that logic. "Okay, let's say I'm interested. What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership," Carla said simply. I have the skills and resources to dig deep into Ashton's dealings. You have the motivation and the insider knowledge about your ex-wife's involvement. Together, we might just be able to bring him down. I mulled it over for a moment. It was risky, potentially dangerous. But then I thought of my kids, of everything that had been taken from me. I'm in, I said firmly. But I need to know, why are you really doing this? What's your stake in all this? Carla's expression darkened. Let's just say I've seen firsthand what corruption can do. I used to be a cop, until I tried to expose some dirty dealings within the force. Instead of being hailed as a whistleblower, I was fired. My reputation ruined. I nodded, understanding dawning. So this is personal for you too. You could say that, Carla agreed. So, Mr. Mason, shall we get to work? For the next few hours, Carla and I pored over everything I knew about Ashton and Shannon. We created a timeline, identified key players, and started mapping out potential leads. We need to focus on Ashton's business dealings, Carla said, tapping a pencil against her chin. That's where we're most likely to find dirt. I nodded, then hesitated. What about Shannon? She's involved in this too. Carla gave me a sympathetic look. I know it's hard, but we need to concentrate on the bigger fish first. Once we have something solid on Ashton, Shannon's involvement will likely come to light as well. As much as it pained me to admit it, I knew she was right. Okay, so where do we start with Ashton? We follow the money, Carla said decisively. Every corrupt businessman leaves a trail, no matter how careful they are. We just need to find it. Over the next few weeks, Carla and I worked tirelessly. She taught me the basics of investigation, how to follow paper trails and spot inconsistencies. I used my knowledge of the business world to help interpret financial documents and corporate structures. It was slow, painstaking work, but gradually, a picture began to emerge. Ashton's empire was built on a foundation of lies and illegal dealings. Look at this, I said one evening, pointing to a series of transactions. These companies here, they're all shells. No real assets, just moving money around. Carla leaned in, her eyes gleaming. Good catch. And look at the timing. It coincides with some major stock movements in Ashton's main company. This could be evidence of insider trading. As we delved deeper, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger at what Ashton and Shannon had done, determination to bring them to justice, and a growing sense of excitement as we uncovered more and more evidence. We're getting close, Carla said one day, a fierce grin on her face. I can feel it. I nodded, my own excitement building. So what's our next move? Carla's expression turned serious. We need to be careful, Dustin. The closer we get, the more dangerous this becomes. Ashton isn't going to go down without a fight. I met her gaze, my resolve firm. I understand the risks, but I've come too far to back down now. Whatever it takes, we're seeing this through to the end. As I looked at the web of evidence we'd gathered, spread out across my small apartment, I felt a surge of hope. For the first time in months, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Ashton and Shannon thought they destroyed me, but they had no idea what was coming. Hold on, kids, I whispered, thinking of Sarah and Chris. Daddy's coming back for you. And this time, nothing's going to stand in my way. The next morning, I woke to the insistent buzzing of my phone. Groggily, I reached for it, seeing Carla's name flash on the screen. Dustin, her voice crackled through the speaker, excitement evident. I've got something. Meet me at the usual spot in an hour. I was out the door in record time, my heart pounding with anticipation. Our usual spot was a small, nondescript cafe on the outskirts of town, where we could talk without fear of being overheard. Carla was already there when I arrived, a thick manila folder on the table in front of her. Her eyes sparkled with triumph as I slid into the seat across from her. What VE you got? I asked, trying to keep my voice low despite my excitement. She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. Everything, Dustin. Bank statements, insider testimonies, documents linking Ashton to at least 3 shell companies. It's all here. I felt a surge of hope, quickly tempered by caution. Are you sure it's enough? We can't afford any mistakes. Carla nodded firmly. I've triple-checked everything. This is solid, Dustin. With this evidence, we can bring Ashton down. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. So what's our next move? We need to get this to the authorities, Carla said, tapping the folder. But we have to be smart about it. If Ashton gets wind of what's coming, he might try to destroy evidence or flee. I nodded, my mind racing. What if we leak some of it anonymously? Just enough to trigger an investigation, but not everything we have. Carla's eyes lit up. That could work. We could tip off the FBI, give them just enough to get a warrant. Once they start digging, they'll find the rest themselves. Over the next few hours, we carefully sorted through the evidence, selecting key pieces that would pique the FBI's interest without revealing our entire hand. As we worked, I couldn't help but ask, what about Shannon? Is there anything in here about her involvement? Carla gave me a sympathetic look. There are some documents linking her to one of Ashton's shell companies. It's not as damning as what we have on Ashton, but it's enough to implicate her. I felt a pang in my chest. Despite everything, a small part of me had hoped Shannon wasn't as deeply involved as I'd feared. She made her choice, I said, more to myself than to Carla. She has to face the consequences. With our plan in place, we set things in motion. Using an anonymous email account, we sent a carefully worded tip to the FBI, along with some of our evidence. Then, we waited. Days passed with no word. I was on edge, jumping every time my phone rang, half expecting to see Shannon's name on the screen, demanding to know what I'd done. Finally, a week after we'd sent the tip, the news broke. FBI agents had raided Ashton's offices, carting away boxes of documents and computers. The story was all over the local news, with reporters camped outside Ashton's company headquarters. I watched the coverage with a mix of satisfaction and trepidation. This was it. There was no going back now. My phone buzzed with a text from Carla. Turn on Channel 7. Now. I quickly switched channels, my jaw dropping as I saw live footage of FBI agents leading Ashton out of his office in handcuffs. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, Prominent businessman Ashton Kane arrested on charges of fraud, money laundering, and insider trading. As I watched Ashton being led to a waiting police car, his face a mask of shock and anger, I felt a surge of vindication. But it was quickly followed by a sobering thought. Shannon. What was happening with her? As if on cue, my phone rang. Unknown number. With a deep breath, I answered. Dustin? Shannon's voice was frantic. Dustin, please, I need your help. I closed my eyes, steeling myself. Shannon, I'm guessing you've seen the news? It's all falling apart, she sobbed. The FBI froze all of Ashton's assets. I don't have anything left. Please, Dustin, I know I don't deserve it, but... Stop, I cut her off, my voice hard. You're right, Shannon. You don't deserve my help. Not after what you did. There was a moment of silence, then Shannon's voice came back, small and broken. What about the kids? Dustin, please, think about Sarah and Chris. My heart clenched at the mention of our children. The kids are exactly why I'm doing this, Shannon. They deserve better than what you and Ashton tried to do to me. Please, Dustin, Shannon begged. I made a mistake. I know that now. Can't we talk about this? I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the flood of emotions her voice stirred up. No, Shannon, we can't. You made your choice when you decided to fabricate evidence against me and try to take my children away. Now you have to live with the consequences. But where am I supposed to go? Her voice cracked. What am I supposed to do? For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That's not my problem anymore, Shannon. You should have thought about that before you tried to destroy my life. I ended the call, my hand shaking slightly as I set the phone down. It was done. There was no going back now. Carla called a few minutes later. I saw the news. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I said, surprised to find that it was mostly true. What's our next move? We need to capitalize on this momentum, Carla said. With Ashton in custody and his assets frozen, now's the time to push for your custody case. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. You're right. Do you know any good lawyers? Carla chuckled. As a matter of fact, I do. Her name's Rebecca Martinez. She's tough as nails and has a particular interest in cases like yours. Want me to set up a meeting? Absolutely, I said, feeling a surge of hope. Let's do this. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Rebecca Martinez in her sleek downtown office. She was a petite woman with sharp eyes and an air of no-nonsense efficiency that immediately put me at ease. "So, Mr. Mason," Rebecca said, leaning forward, "Carla's filled me in on the basics, but I'd like to hear it from you. What exactly are we dealing with here?" I took a deep breath and launched into my story, laying out everything that had happened over the past few months. Rebecca listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When I finished, she set down her pen and fixed me with a penetrating stare. "Well, Mr. Mason, I won't sugarcoat it. This is a complicated case. But from what you've told me, and the evidence Carla's gathered, I think we have a strong chance of not only clearing your name but regaining custody of your children." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "So you'll take the case?" Rebecca smiled, a fierce glint in her eye. "Oh, I'll take it all right. I've dealt with my fair share of sexism in this field, Mr. Mason. I know what it's like to be unfairly maligned. I relish the opportunity to set things right." Over the next few weeks, Rebecca worked tirelessly on my case. She pored over the evidence Carla and I had gathered, interviewed witnesses, and built a rock-solid defense against the fabricated embezzlement charges. Finally, the day of the custody hearing arrived. I stood outside the courtroom, nervously adjusting my tie. "Ready?" Rebecca asked, appearing at my side. I nodded, trying to quell the butterflies in my stomach. "As I'll ever be." We entered the courtroom, and I saw Shannon sitting on the other side with her lawyer. She looked pale and drawn, a far cry from the confident woman who had walked out on me months ago. The judge called the court to order, and Rebecca stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. "Your Honor, we're here today to present new evidence that will not only exonerate my client, Dustin Mason, of the false embezzlement charges brought against him, but also prove that his ex-wife, Shannon Mason, was complicit in a scheme to defraud Mr. Mason and unjustly deprive him of custody of his children." Shannon's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. These are baseless accusations. If you'll allow me to present our evidence," Rebecca cut in smoothly, "you'll see that these accusations are far from baseless." The judge nodded. "Proceed, Ms. Martinez." For the next hour, Rebecca laid out our case with surgical precision. She presented the evidence of Ashton's illegal activities, Shannon's involvement in the shell companies, and the fabricated embezzlement charges. I watched as the color drained from Shannon's face with each new piece of evidence. Her lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable, shuffling papers and whispering urgently to her. Finally, Rebecca turned to address the judge directly. "Your Honor, in light of this evidence, we move that all charges against Mr. Mason be dropped immediately and that full custody of the children be awarded to him." The judge looked over the evidence, his brow furrowed in concentration. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up. "This court has reviewed the evidence presented by Ms. Martinez and finds it both compelling and disturbing. The embezzlement charges against Mr. Dustin Mason are hereby dropped, and his record will be expunged." I felt a surge of relief, but held my breath, waiting for the custody decision. Furthermore, the judge continued, "In light of Mrs. Mason's involvement in these fraudulent activities, this court finds her unfit for custody at this time. Full custody of the minor children, Sarah and Chris Mason, is awarded to Mr. Dustin Mason, effective immediately." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. I sat there, stunned, as Rebecca turned to me with a triumphant smile. "We did it, Dustin," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "You've got your kids back." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Across the room, I saw Shannon slump in her chair, her face in her hands. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of hope. I had my children back. I had my life back. And now, finally, I could start to rebuild. Weeks passed, and I threw myself into creating a stable, loving environment for Sarah and Chris. We moved into a modest but comfortable apartment, and I worked hard to reestablish my career, taking on freelance architectural projects while I rebuilt my reputation. One sunny afternoon, as I was helping Sarah with her homework at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dustin, please. We need to talk." Shannon. I frowned, showing the message to Sarah. What do you think, sweetheart? Should Daddy talk to Mommy? Sarah's little face scrunched up in thought. Is Mommy coming home? My heart ached at the innocent question. No, honey. Mommy. Mommy made some bad choices, remember? She can't live with us right now. But you always say we should forgive people, Chris chimed in from where he was playing with his trucks on the floor. I sighed, realizing this was a teachable moment. You're right, buddy. Forgiveness is important, but it doesn't mean we forget or let people hurt us again. How about this? I'll talk to Mommy, but not right now. Right now, it's family time. The kids seemed satisfied with this, and we went back to our activities. But later that night, after they were in bed, I found myself staring at Shannon's message again. Against my better judgment, I called the number. Dustin? Shannon's voice was small, hesitant. I didn't think you'd actually call. I almost didn't, I admitted. What do you want, Shannon? There was a pause, then a shaky inhale. I need help, Dustin. I've lost everything. My job, my home. I'm living in a tiny studio apartment, and I can barely make rent. I know I don't deserve it, but is there any way we could meet? Just to talk? I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions warring within me. Shannon, I don't think that's a good idea. Please, she begged. I'm not asking for money or anything like that. I miss the kids. I miss you. Can't we at least try to be civil, for Sarah and Chris's sake? I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Fine, we can meet, but in a public place, and just to talk. Nothing more. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop the next day. As I walked in, I spotted Shannon immediately. She looked different, smaller somehow, without her designer clothes and perfectly styled hair. Dustin, she said, standing as I approached. Thank you for coming. I nodded, sitting across from her. You wanted to talk. So talk. Shannon's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Dustin, for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I regret what I did every single day. I kept my face impassive. Why did you do it, Shannon? We had a good life. A family. Was it not enough? She shook her head, wiping at her eyes. I don't know. Ashton. He made me feel special, important. He promised me the world, and I was stupid enough to believe him. But it was all lies. And the embezzlement charges? I pressed, trying to take the kids away from me. Shannon's face crumpled. Ashton said it was the only way, that we needed to discredit you completely. I was so caught up in his world, I lost sight of everything else. I leaned back, studying her. What do you want from me, Shannon? Forgiveness? To come back home like nothing happened? No, she said quickly. No, I know that's not possible. I want a chance to make things right, to be a part of the kids' lives again. Please, Dustin. They're my children too. I felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly stamped out by the memory of what she'd done. They are your children, Shannon, but you lost the right to be their mother when you chose Ashton over them, when you tried to take them away from me with lies. I know, she whispered, but people can change, can't they? I've learned my lesson, Dustin. I swear. I'll do anything to prove it to you. I stood up, my decision made. I'm sorry, Shannon, but I can't trust you. Not with the kids, not with anything. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. As I walked away, I heard her call out, Dustin, please, don't do this. But I kept walking, my resolve strengthening with each step. I had to protect my children, no matter what. Shannon had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Months passed, and life settled into a new normal. I had regained my professional standing, working on exciting new architectural projects. Sarah and Chris were thriving, their smiles and laughter filling our home with joy. One stormy night, as rain lashed against the windows, there was a desperate pounding at the door. I frowned, checking the time. Who could be visiting at this hour? I opened the door cautiously, then stepped back in shock. There, drenched and bedraggled, stood Shannon and Ashton. What the hell are you doing here? I demanded, instinctively moving to block their entry. Shannon's eyes were wild, desperate. Dustin, please. We have nowhere else to go. Ashton, looking a shadow of his former arrogant self, spoke up. Look, Mason, I know we're the last people you want to see, but we're desperate. All our assets are frozen. We're facing jail time. I cut him off, my voice cold. And how exactly is that my problem? Shannon stepped forward, her hand reaching out. Please, Dustin. If not for us, then for the kids. They shouldn't grow up knowing their mother is in jail. You should have thought about that before you tried to destroy me, I shot back. Before you chose this man over your own children. Just then, I heard small footsteps behind me. Daddy? What's going on? I turned to see Sarah and Chris, rubbing sleep from their eyes as they peered around me at the door. Mommy? Chris's voice was small, confused. Shannon's face crumpled. Oh, baby. Mommy's here. I knelt down, pulling the kids close to me. It's okay, guys. Mommy and her friend were just leaving. But it's raining, Sarah protested. They'll get all wet. I looked up at Shannon and Ashton, standing there pitifully in the rain. For a moment, I almost wavered. Then I remembered everything they'd done, everything they'd put me and the kids through. The damage is done, I said, my voice firm. You built your own prison, and now you have to live in it. I'm sorry, but you can't come in. You need to leave. Now. Shannon's face crumpled, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. Dustin, please. But I shook my head, holding my children close. Goodbye, Shannon. Ashton, don't come here again. As I closed the door, I heard Shannon's muffled sobs and Ashton's muttered curses. But I didn't look back. Instead, I turned to my children, wrapping them in a tight hug. It's okay, I murmured. Everything's going to be okay. Daddy's here, and I'm not going anywhere. As the sound of retreating footsteps faded, washed away by the rain, I knew that this chapter of our lives was finally, truly over. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media frenzy. Ashton's trial became a national sensation, exposing the full extent of his corrupt empire. I watched from afar as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. One evening, as I was making dinner for the kids, my phone rang. It was Rebecca. Dustin, she said, her voice triumphant. I've got news. The verdict's in. I gripped the phone tighter. And Ashton's been found guilty on all counts. He's looking at 20 years minimum. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And Shannon? Rebecca's voice softened slightly. She cut a deal. Testified against Ashton in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's still looking at 5 or 7 years, though. I nodded, a mix of emotions washing over me. Thanks, Rebecca, for everything. After hanging up, I turned to see Sarah and Chris watching me curiously. What is it, Daddy? Sarah asked. You look funny. I knelt down to their level, trying to find the right words. Remember how I told you that Mommy and her friend Ashton did some bad things? They nodded solemnly. Well, they've been punished for those bad things now. They have to go away for a while. Chris's lower lip trembled. Is Mommy going to jail? I pulled him into a hug. Yes, buddy. But remember, just because someone does bad things, it doesn't make them a bad person. Mommy made mistakes, but she still loves you. Sarah's brow furrowed. But if she loves us, why did she do bad things? I sighed, searching for an explanation they could understand. Sometimes, grown-ups make bad choices even when they love someone. But the important thing is that we learn from our mistakes and try to be better. As I held my children close, I realized that this was the true meaning of justice. Not revenge or punishment, but the chance to heal, to move forward, to build a better future. In the months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. I threw myself into my work, designing buildings that would shape the Denver skyline for generations to come. But more importantly, I focused on being the best father I could be to Sarah and Chris. One sunny afternoon, as we played in the park, I watched my children laugh and run, their faces glowing with happiness. And I knew, deep in my heart, that we were going to be okay. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grass, Sarah ran up to me, her eyes shining. Daddy, she said breathlessly, can we get ice cream? I grinned, scooping her up in my arms. Of course we can, Princess. Hey, Chris, You want some ice cream? Chris came barreling towards us, his little legs pumping. Yeah. As we walked hand in hand towards the ice cream stand, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and hard, but we'd made it through. And now, with my children by my side, I was ready to face whatever the future might bring. I love you, Daddy, Sarah said, squeezing my hand. I love you too, sweetheart, I replied, my heart full. Both of you mean the world to me. Chris tugged at my sleeve. Can I get chocolate chip? Please, Daddy? I ruffled his hair. Of course, buddy. Whatever flavor you want. As we approached the ice cream stand, my phone buzzed. It was a news alert. I opened it, my breath catching as I read the headline. Ashton Kane sentenced to 20 years in prison. Daddy? Sarah's voice brought me back to the present. Are you okay? I pocketed my phone, pushing thoughts of Ashton and Shannon aside. I'm great, sweetheart. Now, let's get that ice cream, shall we? Tomorrow is a new day, and I'm ready to face it head-on, with Sarah and Chris by my side. We are more than survivors now. We are victors, ready to write the next chapter of our story. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.